Welcome, Ira. Thank you so much for joining us at Chabad.org courses.
No, thanks. This has been great.
I just want to get this right. You are a professor at the New York Medical College, right?
Correct. I'm their Director of Biomedical Ethics and Humanities. So I run all of the courses that have to do with clinical ethics, medical ethics, interprofessional ethics. I also do a lot of stuff with regards to professional identity formation, and I do teach classes in medical halacha as well.
On top of all of that, you have smicha, you have rabbinic ordination.
I do, yes.
So I think this is going to be a fascinating course. And I wanted to ask you really first, how do you see medical ethics?
That is a great question. And I'll talk about how I see ethics in general, how it applies to medical ethics, and then how I deal with ethical questions. So first off, I see ethics not necessarily as content in terms of these are definitions to know, or these are concepts to know, or these are different philosophies to know. I look at ethics really as a lens through which one should look to solve problems. You know, people can look at problems through an economic lens, they can look through it through a political lens. I look at it through an ethical lens, which means how I understand what facts are salient or should be recognized, how to prioritize different values, how to recognize who the proper stakeholders are in a situation, how to know what's important and what's distraction in a situation. These are all ethical skills to develop, and these are all ways to look at ethics as a way of solving problems as opposed to knowing information. So medical ethics is very similar, right? Medical ethics is taking that lens and focusing it on a medical situation as opposed to a situation in everyday life.
Right. If you had to sum it up without giving detail of the course itself, if you had to sum up briefly what the difference between medical ethics and Jewish medical ethics is, what would you say?
So I would say that there's two main differences. The first difference is in how you think about a situation, and the second is the values that those decisions that you're making for each situation, the values that underlie the decision you're making. So in terms of how you think of these decisions, or how you approach a medical ethics problem, in American medical ethics, it's quote unquote philosophical, which means you start with general norms or general philosophical principles or general values, and then you apply what you think is right and true in the abstract to a concrete case. In Jewish medical ethics, it's more analogical thinking, meaning we have cases from the Talmud and we have cases in the Responsa that tell you what to do in a particular situation, which has the values and has the answers and so forth. Then we have to see, is the case that I'm looking at now similar to or different than the case mentioned in the Talmud and codes? How is it similar? How is it different? And based on those similarities and differences, does the same answer apply or should a different answer apply? The second difference is with regards to the values. American medical ethics has the values of patient autonomy, beneficence, justice, and non-maleficence, which are strong values. There's a value in doing right and doing good, and there's a value in not causing harm and respecting patients' wishes and choices. The difficulty comes in how do you negotiate between them when they're in conflict, and how do you define them in a way that society has some sort of consensus. With regards to Jewish medical ethics, it's not really about societal consensus or defining the terms based on contemporary discussion. It's looking at a long history and tradition of how these Jewish values have come down through the Torah to the Talmud to the codes, and understanding new applications of eternal values as opposed to what are the values of today that we need to apply.
So this is it's a heavy subject. These are serious questions that are dealing with, generally moments in people's lives that are quite grave and decisions have lasting effects. How much do you expect someone to walk away with from this course, in the sense that, do you expect someone to know the answer when they have a medical question? After listening to this course, if they have one of the things we address, or they have, that issue arises for them, do you feel like they'll be able to resolve that question themselves, or do you feel like this is more kind of opening up their eyes to what the issues might be, to what the perspectives of Torah and American medical ethics might be, but it's not final? What do you expect them to come away with at the end of the course?
No, that's a great question, and I think that for this course, and truth be told, for anything that I teach, I would never expect that students would walk away from a course knowing the answers. Because that would just assume that there's one answer that fits to every or any different type of situation. What I really want people to understand when they look at ethics, medical ethics, Jewish medical ethics, any type of ethical lens, if you will, in general, is I want to make sure that they recognize that there's a way of thinking that's important, that it's a skill that they need to develop, and that encompasses a lot more than saying, oh, I know sources, therefore I know an answer, or I know who to ask, therefore whatever they say is going to be an answer because I've asked someone else. I want them to be able to think about what is the important facts that they need to consider, what are the important values that they need to consider, who are the people that are going to be affected by the situation, so they ask the right questions. Also, when they think about it themselves, they look at it not simply as, well, this is an abstract, what do I believe, but how do my values really manifest in practice and in everyday life? If that can come across in this course, then people will be better ethicists and better people.
Right. Do you have to be ethical to be an ethics professor?
Well, you know, they do say that those who can't do teach, but I do think that it's very hard when it comes to teaching a skill that if you don't enact that skill yourself or you don't practice that skill yourself, it's very hard to teach.
I want to thank you very much for presenting for the course and taking the time and putting in the effort in creating the course content. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. This was fun.